Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll see a little link down below to officehours.global. You can get more information about how you can join our little crew here online and in Mukana. Once you've jumped into Mukana, which is our Q&A system, you become a producer. Your questions and your votes really matter here. And especially today, we have a slightly shorter period of time and a lot of questions. So it's really important that you jump in there and vote the ones up that you want us to cover. And we'll go from there. Now, we're handing off Saturdays, hopefully all of Saturdays, but at least the education hour to Emily Russo from Nashville, Tennessee, newly to Nashville, I believe. Hi, Emily.
Hey, Alex. Thank you. So excited. Yeah, I just moved to Nashville and I got my office set up. So hopefully everything sounds okay. One of the awesome things about Nashville is we have fiber. Woo woo. So no glitching. But I'm pretty excited about today. So let's go ahead and jump in.
First question is from Ross Brand from New York City. He says, thoughts on Screenflow 10 and its performance on M1 Max?
Doesn't look like anyone has any thoughts. Oh, there we go. John Pretto.
So I just downloaded 10 yesterday, but not on my M1 yet, but I'll let you know. I was running Screenflow 10 yesterday, capturing, and it runs great. I'll run it on my M1 and let you know how it goes.
And Jim?
Yeah, there was a issue initially with Screenflow 10 and the ability to see Blackmagic ATEM as a web camera, and they published a beta for that for us to test, and I think they may have now rolled it out. So it'd be interesting to hear if that's working. The shipping product is working for people.
Nice. All right, next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, what would you think about cross-disciplinary panelists? I could see some interesting discussions with scientists mixing with artists, for example.
Well, as a teacher, I'm going to say it's awesome anytime you can do cross-disciplinary and get that feedback for your audience. But Sky, go ahead.
Well, I love the TED technology, entertainment, and design precedent that we have that had stirred a lot of imaginations, creativity. And I think imagination is one of the things that is killing us. The lack of imagination, that is killing us, because my favorite quote is the senator that was asking the NASA thing after a horrible accident. And it was the scientist that said, "I'm sorry, Senator, we just couldn't imagine something like that happening." And I know there's a great Einstein quote, but apparently I'm on a quote diet right now.
Rupert?
I think this all these are good ideas. I think that some of it can naturally happen with like the second hour suggestions in Discord and how they get voted up, and the questions that are put forward and how they get voted up. So when people come in that contribute to those subjects that are in demand, I think it kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah, I think it's really important too to give like both sides or different sides of how something works, because as my role worked in the classroom was I was the person that went between the IT and the teachers. And sometimes what the IT teachers or the IT people thought was the best idea for a teacher wasn't what the teachers needed. So getting that conversation going and allowing people to see it from all sides is really helpful. Leo?
We were talking about this in After Hours yesterday about what's the DNA of this, what we're doing. And that is that we're all curious. It's curiosity and trying to solve problems. Maybe, it's like, why do we want to do it? We're just interested in working out how to do it. So I'm just as interested in pulling about how brakes work on a car to how a broadcast works. And it's just, if you have that mindset that you want to find out why this thing works rather than just watch it, I think it doesn't really matter. And the more you get people from a different angle and why, you always sit there and ask your question, well, okay, so they got this, then they made this spaceship do that, but why didn't they just, why can't you do this? And I love it when you've got a panel, particularly when people won't question your naivety on what you're asking questions about.
Yes, excellent point. Alex?
I think that one of the things about the power of what we have here is that it's cross-disciplinary, is that the fact that we have teachers and video people and audio people and people who sell the products and do all and so there's this wide range of it, which I haven't seen anywhere else. And what makes it interesting is that we are answering those. I also think that we could expand that net And I think that, after hours and Saturdays are going to be a great place. Like we're going to be cooking again next week. so the way where we can start to spread out and see how far and how wide that net can go.
Mark?
I am an architect and my family's been involved in radio. So right there's a cross-disciplinary. But what I've seen that's been interesting in the architecture discipline is architecture firms now hiring people with dual degrees so they get information and education that's across the spectrum. So for instance, they'll look for people that have undergraduate degrees in one discipline, maybe psychology, and then a master in architecture, so they can pull in how do people think when they enter a room or a space, especially if it's a retail space and you're trying to encourage the selling of goods.
All excellent points. Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, would there be unusual lights like UV lights that could be controlled via DMX?
John?
My lights back here are DMX, and certain fixtures have UV. The one here that's in pink back here, let me see. See that pink back there? That's a mixture of red and UV together. And they're all controllable via DMX. On my iPad, I'm running the application to control the DMX lights.
Courtney?
And just make sure your UV is only A and B and not C type UV, because you don't want to put C type UV in and expose it to any person or thing, living thing that you don't want to be dead or burned.
Good point. All right. Next question.
Next question is from Rupert McCrae from Dallas, Texas. He said, for intimate music venues wanting to pivot to digital first, what effective production use can be made of what was lounge and table space?
Alex?
It's a great place for cameras. So I mean, one of the big problems that we've had in the past with all of this is that we can't put the cameras where they really want to be because there's all these people in the way. And so by taking them out, you can do that. The other thing to think about are screens where they can interact with the audience that's watching them. So a lot of artists still feel like they need to, interact with people, and it's very valid. I couldn't do this show, or I couldn't be on this show if I couldn't see people. One of the things we've been experimenting with is LED walls and screens versus LED walls or LCD screens. They don't work as well as we thought because they slap back. The audio goes out and comes back really fast. So we're playing around with the idea of rear projectors projecting onto the screens, and then literally cutting a hole in the center of the screen and putting a camera lens out of it so that they can look right at people and get that experience. And so we're kind of messing around with that process right now to figure out if that's a great way for the artist. And if you take, for instance, Zoom and use Unreal, you can actually have we haven't done this yet, but this is what we're working on. We can have the squares just move a little around the camera so that the camera is never on top of anybody. You just skip the area where there's a camera in the screen. And so there's a little bit of design there, but that's another thing you can think about with the lounge is that you put screens in there that they can see either other venues. So imagine 100 people watching somewhere else, or individuals like we have here, and they can interact with them. And really the latency is not a big deal. 200 milliseconds is 200 feet out, into a venue, from a standard delay. So it would be enough.
Interesting. Jeffrey.
So the bigger problem is that eventually digital first will become public usage again, because any type of venue like that is going to need to make money off of it, and they usually make money by bringing people in. So if they do anything like that, it's going to have to be movable. It's going to have to be repositionable. So when they do have events where people are starting to come in, or hybrid events or anything like that, they'll have to be able to move things around to adjust and accompany those people in the crowd.
Alex, and then Rupert.
Scalability of streaming, if you charge people for the streaming, will way outrun anything they could make with the liquor license. So the thing is, eventually some of these smaller venues that have, I don't think it's for, I think that they're going to find for a smaller venue that's only like less than 200 or less than 150 capacity, probably could make more money streaming if they got it off the ground than they could with anybody in there. And then they're not going to move things in and out. Once they can make more money doing it another way, they're just going to keep doing it that way. Go ahead. Sorry. I was going to throw it to Rupert.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, this is a particular scenario I've got in mind, and from what I've heard, they are realizing it's intimate venues who are more local, but they're now realizing they have far wider reach in a virtual world, and that they've attracted some customers, and they don't want to turn them away, and it's going to be an attractive proposition. So, I believe this is the way they're wanting to go.
Yeah, I'm wondering why you wouldn't just build a studio. Like, once you've lost the people coming into your bar, why not give up that space and move to a studio or something that's more custom to that, so that you have better playback? Rupert?
Yeah, so this particular case isn't actually a bar orientated venue. It's a musical performance related venue. So they're pre-equipped and they have some other infrastructure that wraps around it that kind of makes it what it is.
Alex?
The investment is a lot less to just take your bar, and especially if your bar is known. Like if like we can't do it right now, but if CBGB's was still around, CBGB's could have its own live stream thing, and you're just going to watch a band, but you know what it should look like, and all you're adding is a couple Blackmagic cameras and to the mixer that you already have, and a stream, something to stream, and so that's a relatively small investment as opposed to moving the entire thing, especially if you have a 5-year lease that you're 3 years into. So.
Courtney, and then Jeffrey.
And if your lounge had a food involved, you could do takeout. So you could keep the kitchen staff on rather than laying them off, and have them prepare food and send a takeout to the online patrons. I don't think they could do that with liquor, because the liquor license might not cover liquor outside the venue, but food could be delivered.
Jeffrey?
The biggest problem, and I'm going to dispute this, the biggest problem is that the competition becomes too hard. You have to deal with streaming rights, you have to deal with copyrights, you have to deal with this, that, and the other thing. And then, of course, now Fortnite's coming in, with like Ariana Grande doing concerts from a digital CGI situation. So, with all that competition, that small 200-person venue is going to really be hard pressed to have some sort of streaming digital first option.
Jonas, and then Alex.
I don't think that they should care about big players like Fortnite. I think there's a big market for a lot of smaller venues that do like special things. And the interesting thing is that we, even with like smaller stuff, we saw for my church, for example, we have now a higher attendance that our room could fit, just because of we went online, and I can tell you, there are a lot of other churches, and it's availability, and you have a larger audience.
We locations, especially for small bars and smaller venues or smaller regional locations, are pretty hard, because you have to find a very specific group of people to show up to a specific band and so on and so forth. The world is billions and billions of people, and we have barely scratched it. When we look at digital first events, we have barely scratched the surface of capacity. We see so many people seeing 2, 3, 4 times as many people showing up online than they did in person. Now, are we charging the same amount of money? No, we don't need to, because we're actually generating the same per show, and so it's just with no overhead. So I think that it's going to be a really interesting thing, and a huge opportunity for small venues I think large venues have CapEx problems, but small venues of 200 or less, or sound studios, I think it's an incredible opportunity.
Great. Next question.
Next question is from Guy Cochran. He said, what did folks do to get super source boxes before the ATEM Mini Extreme?
John, and then Leo.
Yes, this is something that interested me before with the older ATEMs. In fact, I made some videos about it, and shamelessly plugging, but not shamelessly plugging because I don't recommend doing this. But I had this Demon Quad box, which took SDI in, and then you could create some layouts that kind of looked super source-ish with their tool. But like I said, ATEM Mini Extreme these days is a much better way to do it.
Leo and then John.
So I've always done this in software for a long time, using Wirecast, using vMix, using Ecamm. This isn't new. In fact, it was actually really easy to do because you just brought in all the cameras straight into the box and you did it that way. It's changed because you can do it in hardware, but I actually found it was much, much easier to bring all the cameras straight into the machine and do it in the software.
Go ahead, John.
Leo stole my thunder. So the interesting thing about software is it uses a layers paradigm. And so those people that grew up with Photoshop like me, you just layer in as many sources as you want. It's super easy.
Jeffrey?
To the software thing, the real advantage with using it through the ATEM is you also have the ISO ability. If you have the ISO version, is have the ISO ability, so you can do some post production. Software ISOs are hit and miss right now.
Alex?
Stability is also a thing. So when you start adding, you can say, oh, the software can add as many layers as you can, but can the computer add as many layers? And will it tell you when it ran out? And usually you find out in the middle of a show rather than later. And so the advantage of the ATEM is that it can do it. We've just done some stuff recently with Mix Effect Pro that is animating it and running it and automating it and everything else. And I have to admit that this, between what John is doing with Here to Record, and what Adam Toe's doing with Mix Effect Pro, those two things are changing. John and Adam are changing the way our ATEMs work to a point where we're getting the stability we got with software and stability we got with hardware with the flexibility that we got with software. And so I think, we're just at the very beginning between what John and Adam are doing to see, and also what Andy Carluccio is doing. But all those things mixed together has the opportunity to create something that that you couldn't do in a traditional switcher.
Ross?
For the average person, it's offloading so much computing power that's taken up by the software. Those are just very heavy. So now you've got it used. You're using an ATEM Mini, and you're putting all that into the hardware.
Leo?
And further shout out actually also for doing this in the cloud. So I have used StreamYard for quite a number of years. And if what you're trying to achieve is multiple people up on a screen with layers over the front, a different background, etc., you can literally do this straight out of the box with something like StreamYard.
All right. Next question.
Next question is from Rupert McRae from Dallas, Texas. Do any panelists prefer to run Zoom in single screen and single window mode, even when on a multi-screen system? And if so, why?
Jonas?
I'm on a 3-screen system right now, and I run it in single mode because at one point I got annoyed telling people like, sorry, I need to find your screen share. And yeah, I'm much more present if I just have one window that I need to find, and just right now I'm looking at the gallery feed. If I need to look at something else, I'll just switch it.
John and then Leo.
Exactly what Jonas just said. And then I have this Facebook portal back here for gallery view. So I use it for all my shows to know exactly what the producers are seeing.
Go ahead, Leo.
So I actually do run in multi-screen, but I have 3 screens, but I put everything onto one physical screen. So I drag them all back over again. In particular, the one that I found for ages and ages, I never did it, is to break the chat out. I now break the chat out so it undocks, because it just infuriated me whenever you're producing a program, you go to click on somebody and it just brings up the chat box over everything you were doing. It's like it thinks that's the only thing you ever want to do. So I broke it out into there. The annoying thing with that one window, the chat is the only one on a Mac that sits on top of everything. It will not sit behind anything else, when the windows you said before, the one, as Jonas mentioned, the one screen when you're doing the screen share just disappears to the 14th layer behind.
Courtney and then Sky.
Yeah, I use I have a dual screen mode, and I have a second screen which I usually use for my ATEM. It's hooked up to the out of the ATEM, but I I usually use the second screen out of my main computer as a lookup screen for looking up stuff on the internet if I want to show something that I found, a product or something. The problem is if you're in dual screen mode, it always puts a speaker view on the second screen, and so I always have to deal with bringing a browser over the top of that screen and making sure it hasn't come to the top again. So I just turned it off in Zoom.
Go ahead, Sky.
In the early days of cutting inside of Zoom, also, there was a confusion of what was being sent out to YouTube. And so you would be looking at the second screen, but actually it wasn't really giving the YouTube experience what you wanted. So I'm back to a single screen for that purpose, if we're cutting with inside of Zoom.
Great. Next question.
Next question is from Jeffrey Powers from Madison, Wisconsin. He said, Lucasfilm hired Shamook, the YouTube team that did the deep fake of Luke Skywalker for The Mandalorian. Does this signal a change in graphics creation?
Alex, and then Courtney.
It's definitely an evolution. I don't think that there are definitely, if you look at that, what they did there, some of their stuff was better than what ILM did. Some of it wasn't, so if you actually compare both of those, they didn't knock it out of the park. They just did something that was, different. I think that it saves, when you look at any company buying another company or hiring a couple people doing what we call an acqui-hire, it usually is just like, well, it's cost less money to just hire the guys that have spent all this time on it. We get all that back, back research. So it's, if you're going to hire artists to go down that path anyway, you might as well hire the ones that spent the last couple of years nugging through it. So it's a pretty easy hire for ILM.
I was going to say, it's a great resume, no?
Oh, yeah. Well, and there's, by the way, I just want to say one thing about someone who worked at ILM. There's a long history of people doing really great videos and ending up at ILM. We had one animator that did this unbelievable 3-minute video, and all of us watched it, and he was working at ILM a couple weeks later, and so ILM definitely keeps its eye out for outrageously good examples of graphics.
Okay, go ahead, Courtney.
I think it will signal a change in talent contracts, because all on-screen actors and so are going to want to deal with this fact that they can use a deep fake to put their image on, stand-ins and stunt people and everything else. And it may trigger that. It's become so good at faking that and making it believable that you have to take that into consideration every time you negotiate a contract.
Jonas?
There's another group of YouTubers called Corridor Digital that also work a lot with like deepfakes, and they started getting hired for that by film companies. And I find it just really cool that people like these that just have been artists for a long time now also get into the bigger films.
Jeffrey, then Alex.
So Courtney, you're thinking of the Crispin Glover Back to the Future 2 type situation where using the likeness is going to be important. Do you think that it's also going to be an issue when people pass away and they still got to use them? Like, for instance, putting a Princess Leia into a future film.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you want me to answer that, but yeah, they do have to. Their estates usually carry over their reproduction rights. A lot of times they inherit that. And so you still have to negotiate with the estate of whoever the dead actor is for those rights. So.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and those estates were paid for those usages as well. So that that's already been happening. And a lot of I know for the last 15 years, a lot of actors have been 3D scanned every year, or even sometimes more often, depending on their age, because they want to be able to use that data. They want to sell that data into the future. So when they're 80 years old, they want to be able to provide a production company their 15-year-old self, and the best technology they had to do that was laser scanning. And so it started off with cyberware. It's gotten a lot better. But the idea is that they want to be able to sell that and make more money on it. so to Courtney's point, there's a huge opportunity as well. And it also changes the way we do stunts, because right now you'll see, if you watch stunts a lot, you'll see the stunt person put their arm over themselves. They'll turn away from the camera. They'll do a bunch of things to make sure that you don't notice that it's not them. And that goes away with deep fakes, where they can just do the stunt and you can just put the face onto it. And it definitely is going to change the way stunts work. In fact, make it more likely that stunt actors get more work because they can be used closer to camera.
All right, next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, what would you think about deep dive second hours for topics, i.e. cellular technology from VIC, parallel high performance computing and the like, that may not be used in mainstream production workflows, but have a strong influence on our world?
Go ahead, Leo.
I don't think there should be a limitation and just say that everything's got to be production. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm wrong. But my view is that technology, and really it goes back to the question asked earlier. There's an interest in everything. We've spent after hours watching the rockets being built and questioning both on the production side of it, but also on how big is that rocket and how big is the crane and how was that crane built? So what crane built that crane was the question that we were trying to work out. And if you can sit there and do that, then every single bit of these come out. We would even like to know how big a little tiny house is built.
John?
Tell you about little tiny houses being built. But I would probably, if I had a vote, I would probably push the other way and say that's perfect for after hours, those sort of discussions, because I think there's more than enough stuff in the production world that we haven't even covered yet. And so keeping that thread in the second hour, for me personally, would be much more valid, and then pushing that other sort of specific topics into after hours.
Alex?
I definitely think that we're going to schedule more into after hours. I think for what we're hoping to do is get to a point where the 2 hours that are Monday through Friday, especially, are very, very, focused and on production in those areas. People kind of know that that's what they're going to get. But we're cooking on Saturdays, and we're doing Unreal, and we're doing, and I think that the after hours will slowly fill up with many of these kind of curiosity driven ideas that are not necessarily connected to, to production. And I think that's the place to put those. And slowly they'll grow a schedule, like an appendage, a schedule of things that are happening in after hours. And a lot of us are kind of scheming on how to make that work.
Great. Next question.
Next question is from Jeffrey Powers from Madison, Wisconsin. He said, who is watching the HBO show Small Town News, documenting a TV station expanding to the Las Vegas or to the Vegas market?
Courtney?
Yeah, I just started watching it last night, and it's kind of interesting. A little documentary about all the drama behind the scenes of trying to keep a small town radio station on, and then trying to move that station to a larger service area. And I'm only on episode 2, but it is kind of entertaining of all the people involved.
Anyone else? Thought I saw a hand before, but maybe not.
I definitely want to check it out. I didn't even know it existed until this morning. I've wanted to do a movie about the one that I grew up in, the radio station that I worked in, because the drama was deep.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, they started in January of last year before COVID hit, and they put up the antenna, and then they're going through all the things. The second episode that Courtney talked about, they had talked about how their news editor left, and we talked about it a little bit, and I thought how it would be possible to actually do that remotely and then have somebody on site to take care of the little emergencies type thing, and how we can all help some sort of small town TV news station keep going.
Sky?
Be curious, how much is it going to be real versus dramatized? Because the challenge I've seen is, the John and Kate +8, et cetera. A lot of those quote reality shows are very stiffly produced because we as an audience expect certain things within a certain amount of time. And then there's, HBO doesn't have to worry about the advertising. You've already subscribed to it. But it would be curious to see where the real is versus the produced drama. And so I'm a bit of a skeptic, but I'd like to see it.
Great. Next question.
Next question is from Guy Cochran in Seattle. He said, saw a request for a maestro.io tech come across the local boards. Anyone familiar with this interactive video platform for creators looking to own, engage, and monetize audiences? And there's a link in the question. Anyone seen it? Is anyone? I think I've seen it go by. I haven't actually used it. Sorry.
Go ahead, Alex. I don't think anyone else has.
I don't have any comment about it other than I've seen it go by in requests, and I haven't seen anybody actually. Well, so now it'll start coming back to me. Maestro, in some of the events that we've done, has been a tool to tie Twitch comments, republish streams, put a lot, basically have a bunch of interaction. I will say that we used it in a couple of events. There's one event we do every year, or remain nameless, that does use Maestro to tie comments together to build interactivity. The experience has been mixed with the stability of the platform. I think that's the easiest way to say that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Rupert?
I'm not familiar with this one specifically, but I've seen things like it, and where they've been around for a little while, I've ones that haven't popped up here recently. The more established ones I've seen are still inviting people to go to events and seminars about how to use this stuff. And I'm thinking, well, they're missing a bit of the action there, because the power in this stuff is now the virtual side and the remote side, and doing things over video rather than having to go to a physical event to learn how to discover it.
Good point. Next question.
Next question is from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia. What is a recommended 15-inch monitor plus teleprompter option to use as a second screen for Zoom? Or would you recommend going a bit bigger? I am finding the 10-inch monitor too small.
Jeffrey, and then Alex.
Take a look at some of these portable monitors. Yeah, they don't have VESA mounts on them, but you might not need them for a teleprompter. If you purchase a teleprompter for that option, you get a teleprompter maybe for an iPad, something that has open ends so it can actually fit the 15-inch monitor and work from there. And then, of course, you can take it out of the teleprompter and use it as a regular monitor if you need to.
The prompter people and ICANN makes a 15-inch that we have bought a lot of that we ship with our kits because it collapses really easily and it's relatively durable. Prompter people make a variety of different sizes that once you start going larger than that, up to 24-inch or up to 50-inch, I think they make, so that you can get some really large ones if you like, but you can increment past the 10-inch relatively easily. And then remember that you can always build your own. We've built many of our own. It is a silvered piece of glass. You have to find a good piece of glass, but it is something that all it has to do is be at a 45-degree angle from the monitor. So we've built ones for a variety of reasons, custom, fairly effectively.
Courtney?
Yeah, I found that we bought a bunch of these. Let's see if we can switch to it. eYoYo. You can find them online. There's a 15-inch monitor in it, and it does have image reverse left, right, and it's a 4x3, which is more desirable for if you're going to use it as an actual teleprompter, because it keeps you more eye line more centered into the camera. And that's a 15-inch. They also make them an 8-inch, and they have a variety of inputs to them, so that you can use them for, they have HDMI and HDMI, composite video, and a VGA. And so you can hit them with a variety of signals. And it, like I say, it does have image flip and reverse in both directions, and they're fairly bright. You need a pretty good brightness to remember to work into a teleprompter glass, because you're losing 70% normally of your brightness in the reflection. So keep that in mind. If you get anything below 300 nits, you can have a problem with it.
Great. All right, next question.
Next question is from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. He said, I'll soon be working with a new client location that has existing Panasonic PTZ cameras purchased last year. I'll know more soon, but in the meantime, can I get a brain dump from the panel on Panasonic PTZ cameras, pros, cons, things to watch out for?
Guy.
Yeah, those are awesome cameras. It does depend on the model, and this is where an NAB really comes in handy, because they actually had them all set up side by side, so you could distinctly see the clarity of some of the higher end ones versus the lower end ones. Things to look out for is know about the software. The software is super powerful, super slick. They do have touch screens, so you can actually get a pip of the or a thumbnail of the shot. So if you want a wide shot, program that, and then you can just touch it. And so for operations, that's really handy to just be able to touch and jump. And then also they have a couple different controllers, and they vary based on price, but the high end one is super, super slick, where you get that deceleration on the moves. So instead of these jerky ones where you really feel it when it goes to stop. So you want to know what's in their catalog as far as models. And then the last thing is double check if it's a 4K one. At the end of the zoom, you actually get more zoom because there's something called an EPTZ at the end. So these are all things that it depends on the model, but the clarity of those cameras really can't be beat. They're up there with they're the best. I mean, there's Bird Dog and there's Sony at the highest end, but it depends on which models that your client has. But good luck. Those are awesome.
Alex?
I haven't been super excited about. I owned the 120s and they were fine. They were like, okay. The 150s look really good. And the 150s also carry their 1-inch sensor, I believe, 4K. And I believe that they will send telemetry data back to Unreal. so there's a lot of power available with the 150s that jump. The jump between the 120s and the 150s is pretty stunning as far as the cameras go. And so they're really exciting at the 150s. They're okay at the 120s. As Guy alluded to, the large controller, which is, this big, is amazing. The little controller, it's okay. like you can do a show with it, but it's not great. So that's all I would say about that.
All right, next question.
Next question is from Jonas Dottel from Reutlingen. Has someone tried the ROS dashboard to build unique control interfaces?
Doesn't look like we have anybody.
We need Bo. Where's Bo when we need him? So Bo, if you're listening.
I looked at it and it's free. And it seems really cool. And Bo told us that he's using it with the Stream Deck, and I'm always up for replacing Companion with something else, maybe a little bit more reliable.
Absolutely. I've seen one. The EVS is. I don't know if that's shipping yet. so we'll leave that alone. Anyway, but EVS is. I think that they've showed a little bit of their switcher system, their software switching system. That's pretty cool.
Okay, next question.
Next question is from John Barker from Malmo, Sweden. Is that how you say that, John? Malmo? Or is it?
That's certainly how I say it. I think it's more like Malmö.
Malmö, Sweden. Any recommendations for a brand model of a UPS? I had a power cut 3 minutes before a meeting this week, and I'd like to avoid that in the future.
Leo?
I've always been happy with APC. I used it over and over and over again. The only thing is to be aware that eventually the batteries will die, and you need to replace them. But you can buy you don't have to buy their batteries. If you've got a screwdriver, which I'm sure you have, John, you just pull it apart, see what the battery is, and get exactly the same battery from somewhere else.
Rupert?
Yeah, I've generally had the best experiences with APC, so that's kind of where I go. I also try and always stick up into their higher ranges, like the smart ranges and above, so that you get the most integration and configuration options and the ability to automate things rather than just simply a battery backup.
Alex?
In my opinion, the best solution is Leopard, but it's also the more expensive solution. We've run our whole trailer on those. I can't afford those for my home. So I have APCs. I've bought almost every size of APC, Cyberware, Leopard. And the one that I get on a day-to-day basis is the 1500 volt amp version because of the feature set. You can click through it and you can see like how long does it think it can run. With my whole studio here, it is literally like 111 minutes. It'll just say, I think I can run this for 111 minutes. And so it'll tell you how much that is. It'll tell you what the draw is. Right now I'm running like 5 or 10% of its capacity, but it's only $150, $160, and it'll run a whole, this is my lights, everything is all running. And it says, oh, I can do that for almost 2 hours, and so it's a really great one. And it's just the lower expense. You might as well just spend into that. And I'm getting another one just for the internet connection, just because my power has been dropping every couple of days right now. And there's something PG&E.
Yeah. Mark?
You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but we've had situations where we've gone in to replace the batteries in rack mounted units and they were so swollen you couldn't get the batteries back out. And I've been told it's because we didn't exercise the UPSs. I don't know how true that is.
That is, by the way, the other advantage of the APS or the APCs, the 1500s, is that they're big. The batteries just slide in and out. Of them, there's nothing to uninstall or reinstall. We have had them swell, but we've always gotten them out with a little bit of pressure. Yeah, and it could be the case that they weren't exercised. That just means that you haven't brought them down to zero often enough.
Yeah, that's what we have, the APC. So, all right, next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, I remember news reports about a power outage in New York City that affected multiple Broadway shows. Even if the audio console itself is on UPS, wouldn't there be issues with lighting, video, automation, and other systems not shutting down properly?
Rupert?
So there could well be, but this kind of goes back to our previous question also. If a backup system and a power APC UPS system is properly designed over an entire infrastructure, that will include a whole elegant shutdown procedure. So you'll run on batteries for some time and you'll know your capacity, and if you're going to be running out, you integrate all those systems so it gracefully shuts everything down. And then ideally you'll have a graceful startup procedure also. We may have managed PDUs where everything's sequenced or staggered so that the whole system can shut down and then start up really in an automated fashion.
Yes, Jonas.
A lot of larger shows or larger anything, you also have a disaster recovery management. So somebody knows what to do. There's a plan for that. On all of our shows, we have like a plan. Internet goes out, this is the next step. This goes out, this is the next step to recover from an outage.
Courtney?
Ideally quickly.
Yeah.
Right. And the UPS really, of course, it's not going to cover lighting, and it may not even cover your sound, the amplification of your sound. So your a live venue is probably going to go down and have to stop the production. But the reason the UPS is there is to prevent all the computers that are running everything from having to reboot and having to shut off. If they shut off, if the power is just plug is pulled while they're accessing hard drives, things like that, it can mung the computer permanently, or at least until you replace the hard drive. So it's to prevent that from happening. So when the power is restored, everything comes back online much more quickly because you don't have to reboot, restart, reload your profiles and everything else into the system because it's already running.
Alex?
I think I've told the story before, so I'll just do an abridged version, but we lost a broadcast truck because a cat, like a full container cat generator, lost its head gasket and it dropped out. Did a hard drop on the truck. When we brought it back up, we corrupted the cards in the Harris router, the $250,000 Harris router, and we hard routed our way out of it. But it was a stressful morning, and so we really wish that Harris router had an UPS. so to Courtney's point, the data, that the stuff that is the most sensitive to being turned off generally has low voltage, can last a long time, and you really want to keep it away from any kind of unexpected shocks.
Courtney?
And another thing, if you're not dealing with UPS, just power filtration, things like that, the worst thing can happen to electronic equipment is a low voltage, not necessarily a spike. They can usually handle pretty easily. But if the voltage drops to if it's 120 volt equipment, it drops to 90 volts or less, that can fry transformers and things like that because they start consuming a lot more current and components start to burn up. And it may not trip fuses and things. So you got to watch out for low voltage as well.
Rupert?
And drops in frequency too. Part of the power grid problem in Texas here a while back was that the frequency was like getting from 59 point something to 59 point something else, and that was a critical difference, and that's why they had to kind of do the measures that they did. Frequency is important.
Alex?
And this is one of the advantages of the higher end UPSs like Leaperts that we used in ours, is that it's charging the batteries, and then the batteries are running everything in the system. And so that's conditioning everything on the way through. And so everything's always getting the voltage it needs. Now you could fry the UPS on the way through, but it's not going to fry everything else on the other end. And so that's another and square waves are problematic.
Next question.
Robert Pearson from McHenry, Illinois said, how do we get to sample after hours?
Ken?
Your friend in this case has anything to do with office hours scheduling or finding out how to log into this show or after hours is to go to the website officehours.global, and you'll see there on the schedule page that has links to after hours.
There you go. The secret is out now.
Everyone knows. All right, next question.
Next question is from Morgan Price from Victoria, British Columbia. Has anyone set up or thought about any audio-only equivalent approach to an office hours-like event, more like a live radio panel? I have several people who would not want to up their Zoom game, but could send mics.
Sky and then Leo.
Well, I think Clubhouse was that experiment, wasn't it? And I guess we could speak into that. At that point, it was audio only.
Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, I was going to say about Clubhouse, but also I was going to say that when people say they don't want to up their Zoom game, it's the microphones that are the difference. It's not the video. Whatever people say, although the video is important, you can get away with the lowest quality. The video quality could be lower than the audio quality, but people, I have this on everything. I do tons and tons of government people that I put through things like StreamYard, and all the time, I never ever send them a new camera. It's always the audio. It's always the audio.
Courtney?
And one thing you have to consider is a back-end system to manage who's speaking, because if you don't have visuals where you could raise your hand or something, you got it, and everybody starts to talk at the same time, most of the systems break down and you can't tell who's talking or what's being said. So you have to have somebody there to referee and manage the flow of the audio.
Rupert.
It may be that you don't want to be on camera to your audience, but that doesn't necessarily mean the panelists can't be also have a video link between themselves to get the visual cues of who's talking and whatnot, but they can just still be produced or recording a audio only production.
Yeah, most of the podcasts I listened to during COVID, they did that. They would open up a Zoom meeting, they'd all meet on there, get the cues from each other, and then it didn't sound like they weren't in the studio once they upped their audio game. Mark?
90% of communication is nonverbal. Some of us talk with our hands.
Ross?
Helps if I unmute. Just to piggyback on what Leo said. The other great thing about upping your audio game is that professional audio gear is relatively affordable when you look at what professional video gear is. So you can send somebody a relatively good broadcast mic for a very affordable price, and again, in comparison to what it costs to up your video game.
Alex?
And how we always organize these when we try to fix someone's thing is their internet, make sure that they're off of Wi-Fi. The second thing is their audio, then their lighting, then their camera, then their background. And those are the things that we find make the most difference. We are going to experiment more with this. I finally have a little bit of room, and we're going to be over August. We'll be getting the podcast up. And we'll be we've experimented for a year of broadcasting this live, and we're going to be expanding that a fair bit. So this is a radio show that has video more than anything else. And so we'll continue to kind of go down that path.
Sounds great. And it looks like that's our question wrap up.
I think we're 10 minutes out. So we probably want to bring in our educators.
Educators, if you're out there, raise your hand. I miss you.
Move
well done, Emily, for your